Where'd we leave off? Oh yes, the workbench was in place and I was bothering myself about the gaps. Well, I kinda came to the conclusion that eventually I'm gonna have some sort of backer. So maybe not a 2x4, but that would enable me to draw the pieces of plywood out and make it so that I have an even overhang. 2 inches here, 2 inches there. You know, it'll make everything look better because you can see this part's darker than that part. Is that what I'm concerned about? Not necessarily. I also want something substantial to clamp to. I have found that that is very beneficial in a workbench. So no problem. I'll pull this plywood away from the wall. But one of the things I noticed, see right now, the gap is just beautiful. However, before I made an adjustment, there was a big gap here and there was no gap on the corners, showing that the wall was kind of bowed out. I also noticed the same curve on this. If you look down the edge of it, as if you would a rifle, right now it's pretty straight. That wasn't the case a little while ago. Similarly, the way that I took the bow and pushed it out of this wall with this brace, I had to push on the wall from the outside. And I thought, oh wow, you know what? I hope there's a tree over there that I can put a brace on. And I happen to have the rest of the ribs and studs and everything laying around. One of them happened to be the right size. And there was this wonderful tree, thank you very much, lending a hand and pushing up against the truck where the workbench is. I used a shim until I got everything nice and straight. And that happened just like spur of the moment. I was like, oh my God, that was freaking awesome. I gotta get the camera and talk about this. Tweaking the truck using braces, whether it's from a tree or from the floor, that is helping get everything back to square where it should be. And I'm gonna screw this to the frame, and that's gonna make everything real rigid. So hopefully when I let go of the brace that's on the tree and the brace that's on the floor, things stay square. And to help do that, I went and I got myself some outdoor screws that are 2 inches long, and they should be perfect. Yeah, when they're countersunk into that frame, that's about where they'll be. Perfect. So good, I'll set up a stop on a drill bit and I'll drill from underneath so that the drill bit doesn't pop through. And then I'll sink some screws in with this at the proper overhang. And that should hold the frame together nice and rigid so that it can't bend. And that'll hold the wall in shape. And that's not just the first one. The trusses, the shelves, the cabinet that I build over here, all of that is gonna hold this truck together really nice and sturdy. So if ever I'm going down the road someday and I get into a high-speed wobble and it starts to roll and tumble down the highway, hopefully it'll stay together. I'm kidding, of course. Let's hope that never happens. I just care about where I am right now, which, by the way, I noticed that when I would go like this, things on the wall would bounce. That tree, that lovely tree out there is holding the truck nice and steady. And when I walk around, it's not bouncing. I love trees. I really do. Trees are so wonderful. Even though they rain little caterpillars down upon me sometimes, and pollen and all that stuff. But yeah, and for anybody out there who's wondering about braces, hey, look who it is. I do have some braces already in place. I want to do some more substantial braces eventually in the future to help get the wobble out of this thing, so I don't have to worry about, you know, trees helping me out. Anyways, yeah, let's screw the work table top down. One of my goals for the future was to find a better place for all my stuff so that working on projects like this, tools would be easier to get. That especially goes for hardware that I have to walk outside in order to get out of a jar. Well, the jar's not that bad, but you understand what I mean. One good thing, however, was that I didn't have to put a stop on the drill bit, because it turns out that the drill bit wasn't that long.
This only has to go this deep.
And that should not penetrate. Beautiful. Yeah, I guess occasionally it's good to have a short drill bit. You know what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, nice. Now I'm gonna do that like 100 more times. Hopefully we'll get rid of things like that. To help get rid of that gap, I pushed down on the plywood as I pushed up with the screw, but that didn't seem to work. I then thought, in order to get the bow out of the plywood, perhaps I could put a bunch of heavy things up there on top, and this way I'd have something to push against. This was all a lot of work, and at the end of the day, you couldn't stand back and appreciate what was done. But I knew the functional advantage that this was going to have, and it was satisfying nonetheless. It's nice and secure now. I can feel the table lifting off the legs, but once the legs are permanently attached and affixed to the ground, we're going to have a nice solid platform, and it's going to help strengthen this entire truck. So next, I'm going to figure out where to put this and how to get a real nice gap. I've decided I want to keep the 2-inch overhang. I don't like what I have going on here, where there's more of a gap there than there is in the center. There's a lump in the center. Unfortunately, I think it's this. I think that was a cut that I made that's slightly wonky. So what I'll do is I'll trim this one so that it fits a little flush. I'll trim a little bit more from the bottom of this to help ensure that we get no gap. Let's see. What is this going to be? Using a metal blending disc. They tend to do a really good job at shaving wood. Okay, well, the gap's a hell of a lot better than it was. Let me find my 2 inches and screw this one home. It seemed like for days I was doing these little trivial things that didn't necessarily look good on camera or were any fun to do. But it was all very necessary if there was ever going to be any more progress. Alright. Wow, what a mess. But this is not time for cleanup, because we got more of a mess to make. Step one is going to be to put a rib here. That'll be the same thickness as this. And if it goes on the wall, you can see no problems. That gap is going to be covered up. You'll see in just a minute what I'm talking about. I held that stud up there, which was previously there temporarily, and marked it so that I could cut off the thickness of the plywood that I had just added. While I was doing all of that, I had tried something that I thought made me very clever. These metal brackets that are holding the trusses up here temporarily are making it a little cattywampus, so I carved one of my pieces of scrap into a tool that I can use to kind of... Oh man, that worked so many good times. That worked a bunch of times and now it broke. These can line up if I can bend that, which I guess I gotta make another wrench. Sometimes you think you're slick, not so much. Son of a bitch. That might work. I swear to you, I used that tool a whole bunch of times to straighten out some of the other trusses, and it worked fantastic. And of course, when I wanted to do it one more time for the camera, it broke on me. But I was bent to get that shot one way or another, even if I had to make another one from scratch. Alright. Now, let's see. I guess I could delete this scene. Sometimes you just gotta beat something with a hammer. There you go. Let that be a lesson to the rest of you. Alright, where was I? I was screwing this thing home. To square this stud up, I used that wonderful idea from Pythagoras. And after it was 90 degrees, I felt I would honor that old idea by doing it barefoot. I'm thinking that these are going to be those same types of fasteners that I used to hold the ledger board down. Now I need to cover this gap. I'm going to do that with a 2x4. Eight and a quarter. Says I, says me. Alright. Because this is a 2x ripped in half, it stands a little bit proud, and that's why I'm cutting the 2x4 instead of cutting this. I think I'm just going to proceed with the rest of the ribs. I'll put a rib here, I'll put another piece of 2x there, I'll put a rib here, another piece of 2x4, etc.
etc., etc., etc.
etc. Now what I do is make sure that this thing is perpendicular to the tabletop or parallel with that one. And then I'm going to mark this board real careful like, and then I'll come back and cut it. Probably with a handsaw, because a handsaw is going to give me a lot of precision. You know, I forget sometimes how efficient a handsaw can be. When they're sharp, they cut real fast. The battery never dies on it. A good handsaw can really be your friend. That's pretty nice. Now eventually I may be putting some pegboard on here, so there'll be a little trim going over it. I have to stop worrying about those little gaps. That gap is there because of the curve of this, the edge of that. I see things like that and it really makes me, well, more nuts than normal. Have to let it be. That's why I like to hold a piece in place and mark it versus measuring. I always seem to get a better fit when I do that. Yeah, and again, that's standing a little proud. That looks pretty good. I'm liking it. Yeah, all right. 1, 2, 3 more ribs, and we'll be right back. Well, you can see I've added a bunch of pieces to the where the second shelf is going to be the higher shelf, and I've gotten over here to the corner, and I can't quite figure out how I'm going to finish this. If I'm going to have these pieces further apart like that or closer together. I've thought about maybe reusing these factory bolts or nuts, whatever you call them, and then replacing them with the ones that I bought so that these would cover there. I don't know, I'm kind of stumped as to what I want to do there. And in the meantime, there's a bunch of things that I know what to do, so I'm going to do what I know, and I'll contemplate that, and I'll come back to it later. It happens a lot during a project where you get stumped on one particular aspect, you know, like not really sure how to do it, or you find yourself reaching a little high because you don't have a proper ladder or proper tool, and you know that you can come back the following day with the right stuff and get it done a lot easier. So it's good not to get stuck on things that give you issues. I mean, if I really want something to do, I can sand all of these. I've been putting that off. Sanding pressure treat is not my favorite thing. But I do have a new disc, so maybe that job will go a little bit easier. But yeah, in the meantime, let me keep going and finish those off. And we'll be back right after these messages. Hey, do you have life insurance? Are you or your loved ones concerned about health costs? Okay. I'm at a good point, I think, to take a break or stop for the day. But it is absolutely killing me because I want to see those trusses in place. So I might take a pair of them, sand them down, and hang them up there, at least temporarily. I want to see what they look like from a distance instead of just holding it up, you know? This one is kind of sanded already. Sexy. one of the reasons I wanted to say this is going to be temporary is because you see the gap there? Yeah. This probably needs to be shaved down, which could alter the location of this. It was going to be real hard to tell because I don't know if this is square because of the bow of the roof. It should be square, but it was also impossible to see that from down there. So there is a chance that these are going to have to be custom made, one per piece, you know. But this is going to tell me what I want to know, because I wanted to know when you walk in here, how much clearance am I going to have under that? You know, when I'm working at the workbench, am I going to hit my head on that because this is a shallower workbench? I think it looks good. A taller person that leans forward, I guess they could knock their head on that. You have to be really tall. So I might have to have like a height restriction for coming in here. But no, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I'd love to mock up the rest of them and see what that looks like. And then on the other side too. Oof. Patience, man, patience. We still got a long road ahead of us. I think it's time for a nice cold beverage. Clean up. Tomorrow is another day. Thanks for joining me for another episode. I promise there will be another, and another, and another, etc., etc., etc.